We had a deal where it was just one house recently, and seller was like, I want $700,000 for it, and we're like, well, it's only worth like 350, but hey, if we could give you a seven for it, would you be interested in waiting for a little while? And they said, yeah, how are you going to do that? And we already knew we could take this piece of land from one house to 74 houses, and we're about to start developing 74 lots out of that piece of land. That's what we do.
I gave the seller a 50% premium over what their property was worth. But by the time I got done upzoning that land, the value of that land was double what I was paying the seller. He got paid a premium and I doubled my money before I ever even closed on the land or put shovels in the ground.
What exactly do you do with land?
So we work with the local municipalities to identify their vision for the community and make that a reality. And we add value for ourselves and our investors by identifying the parcels of land that are not zoned the highest and best use, and force appreciating the value of that land through a rezone process or entitling it to take it through approval. So think of it like taking, 6-7 acres. We had a deal where it was just one house recently, and seller was like, I want $700,000 for it, and we're like, well, it's only worth like 350, but hey, if we could give you a seven for it, would you be interested in waiting for a little while? And they said, yeah, how are you going to do that? And we already knew we could take this piece of land from one house to 74 houses, and we're about to start developing 74 lots out of that piece of land. That's what we do.
What size was that lot?
What size was that lot? This was pretty big. I think this one was like 20 acres, I want to say, somewhere around there.
So the guy was having one house on 20 acres, and basically as is, it was worth 350, but if you could rezone it and make it into a higher density, then it was worth how much?
Oh God, we could probably just flip that piece of land right now for I'm trying to do back of the napkin math. We bought it for $10,000-$11,000 per pad. Yeah, let's see. We bought it for 700. You can put 74 homes on there. So that's right around 10 a pad. And I mean, we could easily sell it for 22, 23 right now. So yeah, I don't know what the math boils down to, but probably somewhere around 1.5, 1.6 million is probably what it's worth.
Wonderful. Yeah. So you could make $1 million on that deal by selling it, quickly selling it on the market. But in this case, you're pursuing one of your strategies. Before we got started up the video here, before we started the interview, you told me that you have 3 exit strategies and you work on a 4th exit strategy. Let's quickly go through that. So the first thing is, so you find a piece of land that is either not zoned right for its best use, or that's just been underutilized, or that you can do something with it. And then what are your 3 or 4 exit strategies on there?
Yeah. So the key here really is to work with the city. I think that's where a lot of developers make the mistake. If you are giving the city what it wants and you've sat down with them and you've done a needs assessment and you said, what's lacking in the community? Where are all the things the citizens are complaining about? What do you guys need? How can we help you out with tax revenue, and sit down with them on the same side of the table? Then it's a completely different story than someone coming with just some random piece of land and trying to shove it down someone's throat. So that's step one. That's what we really do, is we try to align ourselves with the city and what they want and what they want to build. And it just works a whole lot easier when you're working with someone and against them. Then
that's
from
actually
that
a very
point,
smart thing to do, because as you said, a lot of developers come into a property and they're basically like, I have this vision. And then they're trying to stuff that vision down the city or the county's throat, even though they don't want that. And that's where projects fail. That's where rezonings fail. That's where developments fail, because you all of a sudden get the entire neighborhood riled up against you and you don't have any support from the city. And soon enough, they vote this thing down, right?
100%. It all starts with aligning what the community wants and needs. You're still going to get some people that always are against it. And, that's one of those things, you're never going to be able to make everyone happy. But once you've done that, now you can identify the areas, because they'll get a map and they'll show you what it is. And so that's a big part about what we do. Now, once we've done that and we've identified the parcels and we've identified the vision and we've got a value add strategy there, we either then go and put that land under contract and add value to the seller by saying, hey, we can pay you a lot more than what the land's worth if you allow us to rezone it or entitle it. And then from there, once we go under contract, we'll spend some money on civil engineering to do the due diligence. We'll make sure there's an endangered species report and there's not like a gopher or a turtle that we're going to hurt. We'll do the geotech report to understand what's underneath the dirt, where the rock is, how much it's going to cost to excavate. And then we'll also do an environmental report. You know, we want to make sure that there wasn't like a mine there or some toxic waste that's being dumped on the site. And so once we've got all of our due diligence done and all of our costs nailed down, exit strategy number one is to buy it once we have added all the value and got all the approvals in place. And then we'll just flip that to another developer and we'll go about our way. Two, the second strategy is after we get all those approvals in place and we purchase it, we're already working on this. We have usually then contracted with a builder who has said, hey, if you develop this, aka put all the roads, the infrastructure, get me a piece of land that I'm ready to go vertical on for the houses, I'll pay you $80,000, $90,000 per pad for that. So the example I kind of gave you earlier is we took this piece of land, got it approved for 74 homes. We've got a contract with a builder for $85,000 per pad on that. And so that's what we chose to go and do and pursue rather than just flipping the land. That's exit strategy number two. And then exit strategy number three is we actually take it all the way
Wait
through.
a second. Let's stay with number two in a little bit. So in this case,
Sure.
how are you getting paid 85 per lot? And how is the builder still making money on this?
Yeah, so it's most of the builders we work with are national builders or, very large local builders or who are, building hundreds of homes per year. It's mostly who we deal with. We're not dealing with a whole ton of mom and pop builders unless we have to break that development up. Some of the larger developments, when you get into like 200 plus units, builders want to share that, right? Because they want to be able to move inventory and hit their IRR numbers. We can talk about that here in a minute. But basically, they have a per pad price that they're willing to pay. And we discovered that during our due diligence process. Because again, when we're under contract for this land, we're underwriting for three different exits because it's always important, whether you're an investor or you're an operator,
Sure.
you always want multiple exit strategies built in. So that per pad price makes sense for them. They've backed into it using their Krabby Patty formula and said, hey, if you can hit this number, we will buy these pads from you and we will contract with them. And typically they're giving us a 5 to 10% deposit released. So in this case, we were selling the pads, I think total for about, $6.6 million all in. They'll cut me a check anywhere between $300,000 and $660,000 to go towards that development. So I've got an end buyer locked in for those pads. It's one of the reasons I like option number two.
So, but in this case, who pays for the roads and who builds the roads?
We do. We're the developers. We're the ones developing it to sell the finished pads to the builders.
That's the part that I missed early on. So in this case, you are going beyond just the subdivision on paper and getting it approved. You're now actually going and contracting with people out there with bulldozers and stuff to actually go build the roads, build in that case also you put the utilities in place and saying at least roadside utilities, right? Underground utilities and all this kind of stuff. And then basically deliver to the builder a ready to go vertical on subdivision in a way.
That's right. Exit strategy number one, flip the paper to the developer. Exit strategy number two, we are the developer selling them to the builder when they're finished.
Okay, good. And then exit strategy three,
we are the builder. We build and go vertical on it. And then hopefully we're trying to underwrite exit strategy number four where we can build it and hold it and rent it out and hold it for long-term cash flow and depreciation.
Right. Well, that makes sense because your cost factor is substantially lower. So instead of realizing the profits and sitting on a bunch of cash and then having to go buy something at retail, why not keep the development in that point at a lower cost basis, just refinance into it with a long-term loan and just hold on to it.
Yep. That's exit strategy number four that we're working on.
Can you walk me, perhaps me and our audience, through like on a high level, like what's the process steps from the point that you have a piece of land under contract to the point that you're ready to either sell it to a developer or actually go actually have the bulldozers come in? So what are the process steps there?
Yeah, so you want to get it to a point where you can basically have your approvals from your city and your state. Usually the city will approve everything. The city has an engineer that sits on staff and works with your civil engineer to make sure all the criteria is met and everything is safe. And then from that point, it gets sent to the state approves it. And at that point, you're pretty much ready to go and pull a grading permit and get your bulldozer. So everything I'm about to tell you, works up to that point. Now, here's a nuance. Every jurisdiction is different. They're going to have some nuances. So take it with a grain of salt. It's like a car. I can tell you how to drive a car, but they're all going to be driven just a little bit differently, right? I hopped in a Tesla the other day and like I had no clue how to turn this thing on. It was kind of embarrassing. I didn't know how to do the windshield wipers. So with that being said, the first
I
thing you want
couldn't
to do
even
is
open the door the first time I rented the Tesla. I had to go back to
yeah,
show them how to show me how to open the door of that thing.
yeah, but you know how to drive a car, right? So
Yeah,
that's kind of what
yeah.
I'm about to explain to you. But the first step and really what you want to do, it all begins with having a great civil engineer. If you've got the city kind of where you want them and they're developer friendly and you've got something under contract, they're going to support it. I'm going to pretend all that's been done. At this point, you need a good civil engineer that can draw up a concept plan and kind of figure out how many units you can get on this. Once you've figured that out, you've got a concept plan and the city has like okayed that concept plan. Now you can begin the process. And so really it's a lot of it is, taking you're trying to get up to a preliminary plat approval. So you're trying to take it to a point where the city goes, okay, all right, this is what we're going to approve. It's going to be, 40 townhomes. But just because you get that approval in place doesn't mean you're actually going to get 38 townhomes. Once you get it preliminary approved, it's basically said the value, it's there. You're going to get 40 townhomes on this thing. We've gone through some meetings. There's some public hearings where people can come in and make a case for why they shouldn't want it, and the commission will vote on it. And once you get your preliminary plat approval, then starts the process of figuring out all the little things that take a long time. So the civil engineers are the one that are going to design these developments, and it takes a long time to calculate the slope of the road, to calculate the slope of the sewer, to make sure the sewer and the water tie in, to make sure the grading works. And so this is what takes a long, long time. Your civil engineer is going to start producing construction drawings, and then it's going to be up to the city's departments to bless those construction drawings. So there's a reason why when you're taking something through entitlement that you, for example, have to get the fire department to approve it, and you've got to get the zoning department to approve it, and you got to get the water department and the sewer department. There's all these departments because they know what's safe and what works in the community and what won't cause some, disaster like your house flooding or your electrical outlets, blowing up and your home's catching fire. It's not too close to the telephone poles. So the city and developer and civil engineers, they work together to design something that's going to be safe and it's going to work. And that's what's the painstakingly long process, because it's the civil engineer going and literally drawing and designing everything that I just explained. Then it kicks it back over to the city, and their civil team is looking at it and they're making adjustments and might say, oh, this doesn't meet this frontage dimension. We're going to have to push the road back here. Well, that might kill 2 or 3 townhomes in your development, and there's not a whole lot you can do about that. And so during this process of the back and forth between the city and your civil engineer team, you're making sure that everything's safe and designed correctly. And then, once you get all of those approvals in place, there might be a traffic study that you've got to do early on to make sure that there's not too many cars coming in and out of this road, for example, right? So there's some steps that you got to do, but all of it is done with the intention of making the development safe and to work for the community. And so finally, after 8-9 months of your civil team going back and forth with the city, back and forth until every single department has seen it 9 or 10 times and worked on it and can't find anything wrong with it. At that point, the city is usually voting to approve it, stamp it. And at that point, you can then send it to the state to get your state approvals. Once those come back, at that point, you're usually ready to go and pay for your grading permits and start pushing bulldozers around.
You specialize, to my knowledge, and correct me if I'm wrong, based on what I know about you, in infill lots and either in residential or mixed use kind of development.
That's correct. So yeah, I don't do raw land development. We do infill development, which simply means that I buy typically either existing lots or I subdivide a larger piece of land into existing lots, but there's already utilities at the street, there's already roads. So I'm not doing raw land development where I'm subdividing land, building new roads, bringing utilities and infrastructure in, which from a development standpoint, infill development is simpler from that standpoint. And what we specialize is in multifamily or mixed use development. So either apartments or apartments with a commercial component in those buildings.
So what's the largest piece that you have built so far?
The largest that I've physically done so far, 2 weeks ago, we broke ground on a 45,000 square foot project. So it's 40 apartments and 8,000 square feet of commercial. So that's physically the largest one I've done so far. I've got one in permitting now that's 130 units, and that likely at this point breaks ground next year.
Oh, wow. So you're actually having things in permitting in spite of the interest rates and all the things that are happening right now. How do you calculate? Like, let's talk about that a little bit. Like currently, we're obviously it's early 2014 right now. It is interest rates are a little bit down from where they were, but they're still 100% higher probably than they were, or 50 to 80 to 100% higher than they were just like a year ago. How do you like? Are you in such a high-priced market that development still makes sense in spite of those things, or how does that still make sense? Because most people I talk in the construction area, they're currently just not building. I mean, they're finishing what they built, what they broke ground on because they have the loan and they need to get it going and they need to finish it up, but they're not submitting new permits. They're not going into that part, which actually might lead to some shortage down the road again in product. But you seem to be exception on that. What's your thinking around that?
Well, I mean, in my market, there's a bunch of projects breaking ground. We are not in a super high rent market like Raleigh, Austin, Denver. I'm in Richmond, Virginia. We're probably in the mid-tier market, but deals pencil out. But right now, deals don't pencil out amazingly, but deals pencil out to where they're doable, right? This is not an environment where money is cheap. This is not an environment where construction costs are cheap. The key to get deals done in this environment, I think, is having low land basis and making sure that you're buying land correctly. And we've gotten pretty good at that and creating value out of land through various rezonings, special use, conditional use permits, variances. And so I'm still able to make deals pencil out, but they certainly don't pencil out as good as they did 2 years ago when rates were at 3.5%. But that being said, if I can still make deals pencil out to a bare minimum rate of return that I require, I'm still going to do them because long-term I'm bullish in the market. And these are all long-term plays, right? Like the wealth in these types of deals is created. I hold everything I build and I plan to hold it for the rest of my life. And real wealth in these deals is created over time.
Okay, that's an interesting concept. So you're actually not buying and building and then selling, you're buying, building and holding. That is...
For the most part, I've got a spec home building part of my business where we build spec houses and sell them to owner occupants. But that's not a huge part of my business. The multifamily and mixed use buildings that I'm building, I'm keeping for cash flow. I'm keeping for appreciation. I'm taking depreciation of those things almost, we accelerate depreciation off the bat and use that to offset a lot of other incomes. So, I mean, there's a lot of benefits of these projects beyond just the cash flow that we're going to get from them when the project is built.
So let's go into the land game here a little bit, because you said something interesting that is obviously like if you get the land base is low and you've gotten really good at that. So when you say, so you're finding lots that as they are, the market value might be X, but once you get certain conditional use permits and things like that, that elevates the land thing. So you're paying you're not chasing people down and trying to get them at 50 cents on the dollar. You're just basically finding lots that potentially have some issues that you think you can overcome and build value that way. Is that about right? Or
so I've got deals in the last 2 years, multiple deals that I've done where I gave the seller a 50% premium over what their property was worth. But by the time I got done upzoning that land, the value of that land was double what I was paying the seller.
Right. So you're still
So think about that. He got paid a premium, and I doubled my money before I ever even closed on the land or put shovels in the ground.
I love that. I had conversations with some of our students recently about exactly that. And it's like, if you want to get into the development space, just offer them more than even asking. If you reasonably expect the value after rezoning to be much higher, because you don't have to squeeze them. Because we come out of the land flipping, the land wholesaling world, where the goal is always to get it as cheap as possible. But once you get into the development space, it's a completely different game. You got to think about it a different way. So thank you for bringing this up, because that's a great example.
I mean, look, that's what makes, to me, that's what makes development, and that's what makes land fun, right? When you're looking at a single family home, 10 people can look at that single family home, and their idea of the after repair value is going to be fairly similar, right? Somebody's going to renovate this house. Let's look at the comps. It's going to be worth $500,000. But 10 people can look at a piece of land and envision 10 different things going up there, right? And if I envision something bigger being built there, and if I know how to execute it, either by some kind of upzoning or taking advantage of a building code or some kind of a variance, then my as-built value is going to be much higher than somebody else looking at it, which means I can pay more to the seller than another person. And so there's a huge divergence in how people are going to look at land compared to single-family houses.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, love that. That's great value add here for our audience that is typically just hearing like kind of one message about like, hey, get it cheap, or they're hearing it all over. They're hearing it in the housing world too. It's like, get it cheap and
lowball them. Just offer them 20 cents on the dollar, and they're going to be so happy to, like, no, that's not. Yeah, you got to be more creative.
And that works, but it works only for a percentage of the buyers. If you have, once you get, as I said, once you get into the development game, there's so many more things you can do and really make it an even bigger win-win for everyone, because in that case, the seller just had to wait an extra, how long did it take to upzone that property?
The stuff that I do typically takes a year. So the seller has to be willing to give you a long contract on it. But if they're getting a premium, and if you can clearly demonstrate to them that they're getting a premium over what their property is worth, then it becomes worthwhile for them to wait.
Exactly right. And chances are they didn't get it last year or last week and now are looking to sell it. They probably have owned it for 20 years already. So what's a 21st year to hold on to it? It's not a big deal.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Very cool. So now you do this, you built these up. I love the concept of actually keeping them. Now that sounds great, but don't you need equity in each of these deals? So you're building the equity to the land game, for example, that you then contribute in, or does your spec deal become your cash machine to produce the profits that you then roll over into the other deals so you can buy and hold them? Because the banks are not going to give you 100% loan to value usually, or loan to purchase price and so on. So you do need some cash into those deals. Where does that cash typically come from?
So that's a great question. So it can come from spec houses that I built. It can come from my other operating businesses, right? So I've got other businesses that generate sort of one-time profits, our software and education business, other things that we do. So I channel that money as equity into deals. But then again, because we can be creative with how we purchase land, I can achieve a greater leverage on my development than if I just go and buy a property and put 20 or 25% down. So I mean, just as a simple example, let's say I want to buy a duplex in my market, and that duplex costs $500,000. I'm going to go to a bank, and the bank is going to say, we want to see, let's just keep it simple. They're going to say, we want to see 20% down. And I'm going to have to bring $100,000 in cash as my down payment to buy that duplex. But if I find a piece of land and I can buy it for $40,000 and I want to build a duplex on it, I can bring that piece of land to the bank and I can say, I'm bringing this piece of land that I own free and clear, and it's worth $100,000. So now lend me the construction money that I need at 100%. The bank doesn't care. Most banks, if you're talking to a bank that does care, you're talking to the wrong bank.
Right.
The banks that I deal with don't care that I paid $40,000 for that piece of land. They're going to treat it like $100,000 piece of equity. So I'm able to achieve far more leverage if I execute the deals correctly by doing ground up development than if I'm just buying something and putting 20-25% down on it.
And then in an ideal world, the construction cost is not $400,000, but the construction cost might only be $300,000.
Exactly. And so I'm building another 20% sweat equity. So think about it. You're exactly right. So now I've got $40,000 that I spend on land, $300,000 that I spend on construction that the bank fully funded, and now I'm into it for $340,000 plus closing costs, cost of money, right? So let's be conservative and say I'm into it for $375,000. Now it's worth $500,000.
Right.
So I created $125,000 in instant, not instant, it takes time to build, right? But like I created $125,000 in equity and wealth on my balance sheet by building and not buying.
And at this point, you go to the bank, the construction loan is done, you refinance into a long-term buy and hold,
$40,000 out.
buy and hold thing. You get the 40 out because you only need 100 in, so you have your money in there, and you basically now have done a deal that you temporarily put 40 grand in, got your 40 back in, you have no money in the deal, and it's a cash flowing deal if the numbers obviously are calculated right.
That's correct. Now look, that doesn't always happen, right? The multifamily projects that we do, that I have to build by commercial code, like the $14 million project we broke ground on 2 weeks ago, we're leaving money tied up. We're going to leave money tied up into it for a couple of years because the numbers are tighter. But a lot of the deals we are executing exactly the way we just talked about, and they're great. And if I am leaving cash tied up in the deal long term, it's not the end of the world because that cash is earning me a good rate of return via cash flow. And then on top of that, I'm getting depreciation. On top of that, I'm getting amortization. You know, on a $14 million, you know, that one's got a $9 million note. On a $9 million note, how much amortization how much equity do my tenants create for me every year just by paying down the note, right? It's phenomenal. Yeah. So there are other benefits to holding these projects long term.
No, absolutely.
And I like the idea of doing the work once and getting paid forever. Like flipping doesn't excite me. It just doesn't. Like we make good money on spec houses and it doesn't do anything for me. I get more excited about, you know, that I don't get excited about the one-time big check. I get excited by the small check. It's going to come to me for the rest of my life.